If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. Night Owl, what was the creepiest / most terrifying thing you've experienced staying up late at night? Me and my girlfriend / now wife, were sleeping, and I sleep like a log, except sometime I'll wake up before some loud noise, like less than a second before but enough to notice. And this time I woke up to a loud branch cracking noise coming from the tree outside our window directly to the right of the bed. And I open my eyes and see this massive owl. Like twice the size of me, as a guess, but definitely taller than me, staring straight at me. Wings slightly raised like it was going to fly straight through the window and into the house. For reference, our bedroom is on the second floor. I quietly push my wife to wake her up and she stares at it for a while too, before it screeched loudly and flew off. Turned out, my wife had seen it twice before, and thought it was just a lucid dream sort of thing. But she said she'd never heard it screech before, and that it sounded like somebody she knew, screaming. But she couldn't remember who. She was really shaken, and believe me when I say that nothing phases her, ever in the 17 years I've known, dated and married her. She barely even laughs, mostly just smile when she likes a joke, and as far as my memory goes, she has only laughed twice the whole time I've known her. So, this shattering her confidence, made me feel lost. She had always been there to be my rock, so I decided to man the fuck up and just pull up the comforter and cuddle with her until she fell asleep. Bonus, I had a recurring dream that same night about a black figure so tall that when he sat in a chair his knees reached the ceiling. Same as the other occurrences, caressing the spot where my head was, and as other times, I felt the presence of my grandfather on my mother's side, who died before I was born. My mom would tell stories about how well we would have got along. It was comforting. I slept the best I have in a long while that night. When I was little, we used to go to countryside where my great-grandma lived. She was 101 years old and survived 2 Balkan Wars and 2 World Wars. Her husband was in captivity in World War I and fighting for Tito's partisans in World War II, along with my grandpa. Her other son ended up in Mauthausen concentration camp. So, the house was old and cheeky. The only room that was heated in winter was the one my great-grandma was in, so my parents would make me sleep in the same room with her, while they were sleeping in the freezer of a bedroom. It wasn't the squealing of the house, or the strange rhythm of an old clock, or the trains that passed by, or wild animals that talked throughout the night that kept me awake, but my great-grandma sleepwalking and talking trough the night. She would sit up in her bed and have full conversations with long-lost friends. She would call for them or ask them for the directions, or tell them she missed them so much. But the worst was wailing for killed or mutilated ones. She would say things like, "Oh, look what they did to your beautiful eyes," or "Why didn't you stay hidden? Where could I find a doctor to stitch your stomach up?" I should have been more vocal about my great-grandma and claw my way in that cold room, in hindsight. I was reading the 4th Harry Potter one night, close to 2 a.m., I guess. I had the book on my pillow in front of me, the only light a shitty little desk lamp that just made enough light to cover the open book, when all of a sudden I see some movement just outside of that light spot. I then totally froze as I watched a spider, easily as big as my whole hand and really fucking hairy, slowly crawl across both sides of the book, about 20 centimeters away from my face. It crawled back out of the light spot, down the side of my bed and into one of my shoes. I took a minute to get my breath back, and then I took the shoe, blocked it with some old socks, ran out of the house and just yeeted it into the woods next to our street as far as I could. But man, that minute of watching that spider crawl across chapter 7 and realizing it probably already crawled over me and sat just outside my vision for God knows how long. BRR. As a teenager, I was once up late on a weekend playing World of Warcraft, as one does. My sister had fallen asleep on the couch next to me, and my dad was asleep in his room nearby. Nobody else except our cat was in the house. It's about 3 a.m. I'm kind of focused on my game, when suddenly I hear what sounds like a fridge ice maker. Okay, the kitchen is just to my left. Not too weird. Until a few moments later, when I heard something several rooms behind me, near the front door, shatter. I jumped and checked to see if my sister was still beside me. She was, and the cat was curled up on top of the couch beside her. My dad was still in his room. So what the I can't remember if I woke up my sister or if the sound woke her up. My dad was still asleep. I grabbed a pair of scissors and decided to investigate in case there was an intruder. My sister insisted on coming, so I handed her a second pair of scissors. We crept down the short hallway, peering about, to discover that in the front room, beside the front door, a glass desk had simply shattered. An old iMac had been resting on top of the desk that fell through and broke against the metal framing. There was no sign of entry, and nothing else was damaged. No earthquakes, nothing had happened to cause it. I was confused, but realized I had to wake up my dad and explained what happened. He was upset, but believed I was telling the truth and didn't break it myself. The next day, after school, we had to spend a long time picking up glass shards. Still have no idea what broke that desk. It was around midnight and I was downstairs in the dark living room, laying in the recliner. I was probably watching some show on Hulu at the time. Anyway, I was downstairs because I was home alone and waiting for my mom and sister to come home. After a while, I heard the garage door open. The garage is right in front of the living room, so it was pretty loud. I turned my show off and got ready to go upstairs, knowing my time alone would soon end. But after a few minutes, I got suspicious. No one was coming inside. I got up and looked into the garage to find nothing. No car. No mom. No sister. I had heard the garage open, I was sure of it. But it was closed. I was pretty sleep deprived at the time, but I don't have regular auditory hallucinations or anything. I can't really explain what happened, aside from it being a hallucination. I'm a little spooked just writing this out. Okay, so all my stories are about camping. Anyway, my dad and I went backpacking in Washington at North Cascades National Park and wanted to hike up to a remote fire lookout. Jack Kerouac lived there in the fire lookout and wrote Desolation Angels, and my dad and I both read the book. To get there you hike down a few miles to a lake, then got picked up by someone in a boat and got taken to a floating cabin resort where you could rent a small boat or canoe. We rented the motorboat and went all the way up the lake like 20 miles to the trailhead. Near the trailhead was a small island that we had decided to camp on, and as we were approaching, we saw a man standing on the shore watching us. He had long hair and a beard and was wearing an orange t-shirt and shorts. We boat around to the far side to park the boat, and ours is the only other boat there. I'm starting to feel uneasy. We go to set up the tent and walk around the island. It's small and we can easily search the whole thing in about 5 minutes total. There was no boat and no man. Also, it was pretty far out in the middle of the lake and there was no one in the water, so it's not like he could have just left without us seeing. Also, this area is so remote that the only way in or out is the way we had come from. So we pitch our tent and then get back in the boat to go to the hike. We stay up at the fire lookout late picking huckleberries, and by the time we get to the bottom where our boat is, it is dark and we still had to boat back to the island. We had no light but headlamps and couldn't see anything until it was like 10 feet ahead of us. We hugged the shore a bit, then began looking for the island. A kind of shaking white light was bouncing around on the shore that looked like a headlamp, but as we got closer it blinked then disappeared. Again we looked all around the island but saw no one and no boat. All I can think is that maybe it was Jack. Where I live, it is common that there are towers that will blast prayers in specific time throughout the day. 4 a.m., 8 a.m., midday, 4 p.m., 6 p.m. and finally 8 p.m. These towers are also not of the best quality. It's static and muffled, but still you can make sense of what they are saying. This same tower is also a tower that announces death. So randomly at 4, 3, or even 5 a.m., you will hear the speakers from the towers screech and hear a man's voice tapping on a mic, and proceed to deliver grim news. Good morning, citizens of, insert neighborhood name, we give condolences to, person. Time of death. Date of death. Age. He or she will be buried at dawn after the dawn prayers. O God, forgive our living and our dead, those who are present among us and those who are absent, our young and our old, our males and our females. O God, whoever you keep alive, keep him alive in Islam, and whoever you cause to die, cause him to die with faith. O God, do not deprive us of the reward and do not cause us to go astray after this. O God, forgive him and have mercy on him, keep him safe and sound and forgive him, honor his rest and ease his entrance, wash him with water and snow and hail, and cleanse him of sin as a white garment is cleansed of dirt. O God, give him a home better than his home and a family better than his family. O God, admit him to paradise and protect him from the torment of the grave and the torment of hellfire, make his grave spacious and fill it with light. Once again. Repeats the whole thing, name, age and all. Thank you for your attention. I have heard the death of a 60-year-old, a few month old, a few days old, 30-year-olds, these are the ones I heard at the dead of night. This is not a cult. Just saying. I was up late after getting off a late shift. I had smoked some weed and was about to go to bed, around 3 to 4 a.m. It was summer and my balcony door was open. I had just turned the lights and TV off and then the quiet was broken but sudden, loud, blood-curdling laughter coming from the next street over. It was a long, choking, hysterical laugh that trailed into a gurgle. Goosebumps jumped up all over me and my hair stood on end. They kept laughing, maniacally, and I couldn't tell at times if they were laughing or crying or being strangled. I called the cops, not emergency. I tried to stay straight, but I think the operator could tell I was high and didn't seem to be taking me too seriously. Oh. Someone laughing. But then she stopped talking for a second and said, somewhat more seriously, that her switchboard was lighting up with calls from my neighborhood and that they would send a cruiser to investigate. I saw them driving up and down the block just minutes later. I never found out what it was, but I'm 100% sure it wasn't just some kids goofing around. I'm up late most days because I squeeze as much I can out of every possible waking moment. One night, around 16 years old, I was just laying across the sofa in the living room, home alone and watching TV at around 3 in the morning. I had lived in this house since birth, but not once had I ever been into the attic, simply because I never needed to and there was nothing in there, to my knowledge, that I'd ever want. I feel myself falling out of consciousness and my eyelids slowly closing. The single lamplight I had in the room looked like a mellow orange blur. Right as I'm about to finally fall asleep, I'm brought right back by the shock of hearing desperate footsteps running across my ceiling. It was so deliberate that I didn't even have to question what just happened. I knew it was the unmistakable sound of something or someone running across the attic floor. And so, I walked to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife we owned and for the first time ever, entered the attic. It was completely pitch black, such an absence of light that I couldn't see the outline of my hand in front of my face. Flipped on my phone flashlight, peered around a little in this practically empty space, only to discover that there is absolutely nothing there, but I could have sworn that I definitely heard footsteps up here. I went deeper in, absolutely shit myself by catching my own reflection in an old mirror. Ended up breaking said mirror when I stabbed it and then scurried out of the attic with a bleeding hand and no intruders at all. I often think about that night and wonder if I just simply experienced an intense auditory illusion in my drowsiness, or if there really was something up there that managed to get out by the time I had mustered up enough courage to get in the attic. I worked in an asset management company 3 years ago. There was this unspoken policy that every person in the building should leave before 8 or something. One day I was doing overtime, and I really needed to go to the bathroom at some point, but I did not want to leave my desk since I was a bit short of time, and also I just didn't want to. There was this eerie vibe going on that I can't really put a finger on why. But nature called hard, so I left for the bathroom. As I was walking along the hallway I noticed. There's nobody in the office. I mean, it was expected since it was around 12 dusk. Just as I turned on the lights for the bathroom, I saw myself in the mirror that was in front of me, and this white thingy that was just passing by from left to right. I was like, holy, there is something near me. I did my stuff, and left the office right after when I finished my business in the bathroom. A few months later when I got laid off, I packed my things, and I was about to leave the building when the security guy stopped me to say goodbye. As we were talking, I got a bit curious about that one incident I had that night. The security guy said there was a time when a person was sent to an ambulance once. He does not know if the person made it or not, but he gave me a chuckle and said might be that person I guess, and went back to his seat. I don't believe in ghosts, but I think I saw one that night. I stay up late a lot doing music commissions. But I also live in Arizona, arguably one of the most supernatural states in the US. But this has nothing to do with the supernatural. This time. I live in a pretty peaceful neighborhood, save the rampant fentanyl epidemic and gang issues. It's mostly old folks, military vets, and a few people in their 20s, with a population around 50,000 last I checked. One night, I'm up late working on a comm, when I hear what sounded like screaming and yelling from across the street. I decided to look outside and saw what looked like a gang of teenagers, could tell by their height, picking on an older man and his wife. I swear to fucking God, I saw a gang execution. One of the kids took a pistol, from what little I could see of the shape, a revolver, and shot the man square in his head, then the woman. I was tempted to run out and do a little vigilante justice. But I was stunned by their laughter. Okay, I'm a military brat, I'll admit. I know what death looks like. But what scared me was that the local police did absolutely nothing the next day. There was no report, no news, no investigation. I even called the police, but the dispatcher said that no murders or gang activity had been reported. And that's the story of why I keep my concealed carry a bit closer. I grew up in very big house in the countryside. I need to describe a part of the house so you would understand. The basement is separated from the garage with an armored door. I don't know if it's truly armored, but it's very large and in metal. And the garage is closed from the garden with a large wooden door that is in the back of the house. This door is always closed because we don't use the garage. There's a panoramic view from the living room so anybody outside the house would see the light inside this room if they were in the garden. So I was about 17 and my parents were dining out with friends. I was playing the piano around midnight. It may sound creepy but I stopped playing piano because my parents put too much pressure on me, so I would only play when they were not here to hear me. So I was playing the piano in the living room around midnight with the two dogs next to me when I heard loud noises. It sounded like someone was knocking very loudly on the armored door in the basement, or trying to break the door. The dogs remained calm so I started playing again but it knocked again and harder. This time the dogs raised their head looking around. I totally freaked out, closed all the doors and took the dogs to bed with me, waiting for my parents to return. I tried to calm myself thinking that it was probably a boar or a deer trapped in the garage, because it would make no sense for a burglar to enter the house from this door when I'm just standing in the living room all doors unlocked. My parents went back around 2 a.m. and didn't react when I told them what happened. Zero fuck given. The next morning, I found the courage to check the garage to maybe free an animal and found nothing in it. And the wooden door was closed. More than 10 years later I still don't know what happened that night. I can't be an animal as though the wooden door was closed. The theory of a human trying to break in is absurd considering that it was the only locked door of the house and it was obvious that people were awake in this house, lightning plus piano. So I have no clue, the noise of the armored door can't be mistaken with a wooden door so I don't know. When I was younger I had chronic insomnia and would get bored waiting for sleep so I'd walk around the village I lived in. It was a pretty small place and I never saw anyone else on these walks so my mind tricked me into thinking that was a safe thing to do. One night around 3 a.m. I was sitting on a swing while listening to music and an older man came over and sat on the swing next to me. He was weird but nice at first, but then he kept saying how bonny I was and started to make me uncomfortable so I excused myself and started to walk home. He followed me. I know he was following me because I took the weirdest most meandering route home I could think of, which was difficult considering the village is about a mile long. He didn't say anything, just followed. I was getting seriously frightened at that point and ran home as fast as I could. Never did late night walks again. This was about 6 to 7 years ago. I was about 13 or 14. Woke up at about 2:30 a.m. one night to go to the bathroom while I was spending the summer at my grandparents'. I finish using the bathroom and washing my hands, and I go to open the bathroom door, but something was pulling it closed from the outside. I figure one of my brothers is pranking me because we were all there for the summer and love to pull pranks and jokes on each other. So I keep twisting the handle playfully and then I hear a child's laugh from the other side of the door. One of my younger brothers was very young at the time, 7 or 8, and had a very childlike high-pitched laugh so I figure it's him. Then I hear footsteps going down the hall and the laughter get further away. I yank the door open but don't see anyone in the hallway. I walk down the hall to the room my brothers and I stayed in and they were all asleep exactly how they were when I got up to go to the bathroom. The footsteps continued towards the living room but no one was there. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I'm not really a night owl now. I can't seem to stay awake past 11 anymore, but when I was in high school I would stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning just watching TV and listening to music videos. This one time I was in my room watching some sketch comedy show. I can't remember what it was called but I remember its logo was an upside down clown and it all took place in a high school. But I was watching that and I had my window open. I heard what sounded like someone walking on gravel and then it stopped. I turned the volume down and just listened when all of a sudden I hear what sounds like a little girl crying right outside my window. I never got out of bed so fast. I ran for my bedroom light and switched it on. I then listened to try to hear it again. When I never heard anything I closed the window as fast as I could. There was also the countless times I could hear people talking at night when I stayed over at my grandparents'. It sounded like people whispering and I was convinced we were getting robbed but the next day nothing would be missing. This happens almost every time I stayed over to their place. I later found out the house was built on an old Indian burial ground. I used to work security. Those dark alleys or abandoned buildings that look creepy, it was my job to go down those alleys or go into those houses. I have many stories of this shit isn't right and my noping the fuck out of the place. When I started working security I wasn't sure of paranormal stuff. I had never seen it so I can't say if it was true, but then again I didn't know. So as I worked I never looked for ghosts or anything but usually found an explanation to things that creeped me out. I was in charge of watching an abandoned hotel. Abandoned in the sense that it was bought and the city wouldn't let the buyer tear it down and build skyscrapers in its place. So it sat until someone else bought it. There were still beds and sheets and TVs. It mostly looked like one day people just locked the doors and walked away for about a month. One night I had to cover the overnight shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. This is when I heard my first sounds. I can only describe them as sounds as I had no idea what to compare it to. It didn't freak me out though because the 7-story building was completely quiet. There wasn't anything running. The company turned off all breakers to the building except the area that we made into an office. They even shut off water to the building. So I heard every little creak made by the building, wind or people walking down the road. It wasn't until I heard my name called that I almost shit myself. I know the name came from within the building. Where though I don't know. It sounded like it came from every direction. At this point I pushed my desk into the hall and watched the hallway the sounds came from. It was a dark abyss with a door to the parking lot at the end. So I could see a small bit of light through the small window on the door at the end of the hallway. I stared at that window all night long waiting for someone or something to break the light from the door to my eyes, waiting to charge whatever it was. I was scared out of my mind. 5 hours later 7 a.m. rolled around. The sun was just starting to come up and my relief called to say he was at the back door. The back door was the only door you could open as the rest had been screwed shut. I collected my things and got the heck out of there. I never worked the night shift at that place again. So quick backstory, I was raised in a very Christian household by my grandma. We didn't live far from my great-grandma, we'll call her GJ, and her husband, B. B and GJ lived a good 30 to 40 minutes away, way out in the forest without neighbors and some dogs. Once, when I was about 7 or 8, I was staying the night at GJ's. She'd recently bought a rag doll and when you pushed the middle of its chest it'd say mama once or twice. I loved the bloody thing and had played with it all day. Once night came around I was sharing a bed with GJ because we were watching old John Wayne movies on her VCR. She dozed off and then I heard the doll go off and start speaking. No one else was home, B was out of town for the night at a church thing. I woke up GJ and told her. She said it was nothing and went back to sleep. I was like, okay, GJ, don't save me from the demon-possessed doll then. I continued watching the movie and then again the doll went off, and I said fuck it. I went into the living room, grabbed the doll and threw it on top of a shelf thing my grandma had in her hall, went back to the bedroom and continued watching the movie. After an hour or so had passed and I forgot the doll and it was probably about 9 p.m. Can you guess what happened next? The damn doll went off again. I woke up GJ and she grumbled but took out the batteries and put it back on the shelf. I was like, okay, chill. Back to my main man, John Wayne. I dozed off then woke back up to the damn doll going off again, and I was about to flip my shit. Why was a doll without batteries talking when it shouldn't be? My 8-year-old mind's conclusion, demons. I woke up GJ yet again and she moved it into the closet and closed the door. Chill once again. I ended up going to sleep and then woke up around 3, wasn't able to move and saw the damn doll on my grandma's chest of drawers and saying mama. I nearly lost it, I was trying to yell, then I started praying. Guess Jesus was on the toilet and God was napping because that went on for almost an hour. Finally it stopped or I fell asleep. Woke up the next morning, took that doll and threw it in the bin outside. Found out only a year or so ago that GJ called and told me she'd found that little rag doll in the closet again and I am not going back without a priest. That's my tale of the demon doll. If you ever see a little rag doll with brown hair and a plaid green and white dress and nightcap, throw it out ASAP. I was sleeping at my cousin's house. We were about 5 girls in one room. They had a large bed placed on the corner, and I slept on that side facing the wall with a big window. I remember waking up suddenly, at about 3 a.m., and I raised my head a bit to look at the other side of the bed near the door. All my cousins were asleep and I swear, I saw this girl with long black hair and wearing a white dress. She was turning around and around in place which I found weird and extremely scary. The room was illuminated by the window so I could see it clearly. I was shit scared and kept going back to sleep but I couldn't, and every time I would open my eyes, she would still be there, turning. I would wake up and try to sleep multiple times and always see her. I ended up sleeping at some time that night and when I woke up, I saw a long stand electric fan in the place of the girl. I remembered not having that fan there, because we had air conditioning on, but my cousins would sometimes turn off the AC and turn on the fan at night or in the morning when it gets too cold. But I definitely know the form of a girl in comparison to a fan though. I told this to my cousins and family, but they don't really believe it, probably because their house is a bit haunted. We've had other experiences but we had to deny because they live there, and they get easily scared. I was in the living room watching a movie at 4 a.m. when I suddenly hearing footsteps in the room above me. I paused the movie, thinking it might have been in the film or that I'd just imagined it, but heard it again, clear as day. I could hear the footsteps going back and forth across the room, My house has big rooms, so it's easy to hear where people are walking, pacing for a few minutes. I was terrified, because I knew my parents and brother are the heaviest sleepers ever and also never wake up in the night, and had no reason to go into that room. Mostly I was terrified because I wasn't supposed to be up at 4 a.m. though, and thought if it was my parents I'd be in big trouble. So I quietly finished up downstairs and got a glass of water to make it look like I'd just come down for that, and on my way upstairs to the room where I was hearing the footsteps. They carried on this whole time, and I opened the door and obviously, there was no one there. Weird thing was though, the footsteps were still going. Absolutely booked it upstairs and slept with the light on that night. So I have a hard time falling asleep from time to time. I tend to stay up and draw on my iPad, watch anime videos or playing games on said iPad. Now I've seen, heard and felt wired things since I was little, so sometimes it's no big deal. Other times it's a WTF moment. Now this just happened last night. I couldn't fall asleep, so I stayed up drawing and watching anime. For context, I live in a small one-bedroom apartment with my BF and our year-old son. Since space is limited, my son sleeps in a playpen, which we keep next to our bed. Now my bed sits about 1 foot off the ground, so with the box spring and the mattress it's about 3 feet high. I'm about 5 feet 1 inch. Our bed is up against the wall, which is usually the side I sleep on unless baby is fussy. There's like about 1 foot of space between the bed and the playpen, as my BF sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night to pee. Okay, so here's where the creepy shit come in. I'm sitting up in bed drawing and watching anime. I can still see over my BF and kind of into my son's pen. I know the baby is passed out, all logic tells me I'm the only one awake. So as I'm listening to the anime, I see out of the corner of my eye the top part of a shadow move. I think, oh, the baby is awake, so I lean over to check. Nope, lil dude was out like a light on his back snoring. I think, okay, wired. Go back to drawing, then it hits me. The shadow I saw moved in the 1 foot of space between the bed and playpen. If the lil bub had moved, I would have heard him rustling around. I heard nothing, but the anime I was watching, I had it on low volume as to not wake BF and baby. I said nope, I'm done. Turned off iPad and went to sleep. Creepy shadow children. Back in the 80s I was working a night shift in a small factory. Only 3 of us in the building. We were working away at our machines when just one of a pair of heavy-duty rubber doors, the type designed to just push open when you drive a forklift through them, opened a couple of feet for about 5 seconds, then closed. Just the one door, not both. The other one didn't move. It was exactly as if someone had just pushed open the door to peek in to look for someone, then leave. At the time we all thought someone had just broken into the adjacent warehouse that the small factory floor took up a quarter of, and went to investigate. There was a traveler's camp beside the small industrial estate that the factory was on, and attempted break-ins by the travelers on the place were far from unknown. In fact, we had been unofficially left pickaxe handles by management to use in emergencies on night shift. We were 3 not unlarge lads in our 20s at the time. So, axe handles in hand, and thinking a draft from a forced open exit had caused the door to move, even though the place was alarmed up, we knew the alarm codes, and nothing had sounded. We checked the warehouse, offices and doors. Nothing. The place was sealed as tight as Billy's drum. Nevertheless, the door had opened and stayed opened, as if held, for about 5 seconds. And all 3 of us saw it do so. It was the noise of it opening that made us turn our heads. The building, at that time, was probably less than 20 years old and on the edge of a small industrial estate itself on the edge of a town center. It spooked us enough that we decided to leave early and take the hit of a few hours lost pay. We put down on the log that one of us was ill and needed to go home. The company had a policy of 3 people minimum working on the shop floor. We were already shorthanded. I had to spend a few minutes resetting the alarms as we left and made damn sure the other 2 buggers didn't fuck off and leave me to do it on my own. We had, and did after, hear noises and thuds coming from the warehouse on night shift. But had always put it down to vermin or just usual settling night noises. Home alone, pulling an all-nighter, around 2 to 2:30 p.m., I live in a rural area, the roads are dirt and we have very few neighbors, 3 houses nearby, and one of them was a vacation house, closest one, can't think of a better name for it. It was a Saturday night, so the other 2 of them were out, I assume partying since there was some sort of event at the closest big city, can't quite remember what. There I was having a good time, playing on my 3DS while some YouTube video plays on the background. I basically can't live without background noise of some sort, it just comforts me. When I hear a really eerie howl, it sounded like a human imitating a wolf, half succeeding and half failing miserably. That's the best way I can describe it. It sounded so unnatural, and it was coming from the front gate, not from the sideways backyard where my dog is, not from down the road where both neighbors' dogs were, but from right in front of my gate. I flipped my shit, but decided to play cool and look from the balcony, and even with the lights turned on, the street connected to my gate was pitch black. I couldn't see anything there. I don't think it was some sort of wild animal. It's a rural area, but most of region A is just fields, and the places that do have some amount of trees are far away. No predatory animals have been spotted nearby other than snakes and eagles. I've only ever heard that noise once, and I've never heard of anything like it before or since. I'm not too freaked out by it. The memory of the noise itself is fading away, and it definitely could have been a really distressed dog or some lost animal from who knows where at this point, but it was really chilling that night, and what creeped me out the most was that it was in front of my house, and that I couldn't hear anything like another howl or even the footsteps of it running/walking away, considering how quiet the night was. Back in my old house, my room was next to the bathroom. It was probably around 2 to 3 a.m. and everyone was asleep cause I could hear their snoring. As I was chilling in bed on my phone, I heard footsteps coming towards the bathroom and heard the light turn on. We had a string light, so it made a clunky echo every time you pulled it, and the door creaked closed. I was pretty spooked as I heard no noise coming from inside, and my wall shared the bathroom wall. An hour passed and still no sign of any noise or anyone leaving. I get pretty scared and listen out for the snoring, a good indication to know if people are sleeping. And everyone was asleep. Maybe it was my sister? Nope, I would have heard her door creak and close, and she would have made at least some noise. I eventually stick my head out of my door to see. All I could see was light coming out of the crack of the door and the light switch swinging side to side. Suddenly I hear my ex-stepdad come out of bed. The bed was really creaky, and stomp his way to the bathroom. I quickly tucked back into my room and heard him enter the bathroom and close the door like it was never entered. Like WTF? If someone else was in there, he would have noticed. Like, that house was full of ghostly shit, so I ain't surprised, but yeah. Alright, let's go back a little ways because it has major implications for the story. Generally, I am a very skeptical guy, but these events made me a believer in the paranormal. When I was about 5 years old, my mother was getting into the metaphysical shit. She was probably only about my age, around 24 to 25. My great-grandmother, whom we were living with, had gone out to get groceries about an hour prior, and my mother brought out a Ouija board and began asking it questions. Being the moronic child I did, I had asked exactly what it was, and childish questions like you would expect until I had requested it to do something. Keep in mind, my mother has major mental disabilities, and even now sees nothing wrong with anything that had been done. This got no response at all, so I asked about my grandmother since it had been a few hours, and she had not called to give us an update. I asked if she was in trouble, and it indicated yes. Well, turns out when she did get back, she had actually gotten into a car accident at the time. Nothing major, but it did severely slow her down. Skip ahead to about 10 to 12 years old. It was around midnight and I had settled down, playing Halo on my Xbox. I remember distinctly that I was doing Legendary on the first level, and as I bashed open the broken door, I heard a loud slam on mine. Nobody was awake besides me, and the door ended up with large marks down its length. Nobody believed me that I had nothing to do with it. A few nights later, and I have always been very specific about my door. Especially given the circumstances, and normally would keep it completely shut. For this single night, I did not. As I laid there, still wide awake but everyone else in bed hours prior, I heard almost like a very loud breath mixed with a hiss outside my door. I thought it might have been the toilet. My grandmother often got up in the middle of night, and the sound the toilet makes after it had flushed previously was nowhere near the same, but similar enough to 12-year-old me that I got up to make sure that was the sound. I heard it again directly next to my ear and ran the fuck out the door and slept on the porch for the remainder of the night. Now here I am, 24 years old, and the house has been sold. My grandmother moved out. But I gotta tell you, even now I fear the basement of that house where even weirder shit had occurred. Clocks that hadn't functioned in decades beginning to tick, electronics turning off on their own, and when my friends had spent the night in the guest bedroom, they were often poked and prodded by something unseen. My friend had a hand placed on his back firmly enough he could feel individual fingers. Needless to say, nobody felt comfortable down there but never did find out exactly what it was. Well, this is a short one. At the time I'd say 13-14 years old, and it was about 2:30ish am, and I was playing Xbox, and the house my family were living in at the time was a remote house, but not to a point where you could see a single house at all. I lived in the finished basement, and the way it was set up it looked like a capital L with a shorter bottom half, and the TV I was playing Xbox on was in the corner of the L, and on the shorter part there was a staircase. On one of the walls there was a mirror that I could see on the stairs. So I was playing Xbox and I get a feeling of dread or regret, so I felt a pit in my stomach. I get the urge to look over to the mirror and I see a shadow thing. It looked like a human, and I just got paralyzed with fear. No matter what I did, I couldn't scream, I couldn't move, and I just sat there on the couch and my body was just telling me to ignore it, and I go back to playing video games, obviously completely shitting myself, but I was just thinking to myself, don't say anything, don't look at it, and don't move. Eventually I get the courage to look back and it's gone, just gone. No footsteps, no noise at all, just gone. I went to my room and I just couldn't sleep at all, and I waited to see the morning light for a few days. I was just paranoid about it and dreading that it would come back. But it never showed again. There were a few other strange things in that house, like one time I heard tapping on my window, but I just fell back asleep because it was most likely raccoons or coyotes. It was really late/early on a weekend, probably around 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. For context, I sleep in what we call the casita, which is like a separate bedroom from the house, like where the servants would sleep. The house was from the 50s in a rich neighborhood. I couldn't sleep for some reason, so I decided to pass my time on my phone, while laying on my bed topless and vaping. I was feeling pretty chill until I started to hear a type of moaning or grunting from a man's voice. I'm not a stranger or hearing strange shit, so I shook it off and continued playing on my phone, trying to tune out the continued moaning and grunting, which never stopped. Eventually I began to hear shuffling outside my room in my garden, and the moaning got louder, so I got out of my bed and tried looking outside. By the fountain, I swear I could see a black figure standing perfectly still. Freaked out, I ran back to bed. Later, the voice didn't stop and my fear went away, so I decided to open my door to try to scare them away or something. So there I stood, a 14-year-old girl, topless and in pajama pants, staring into the black of night and right at the figure. The noises stopped, so I went back to bed, put on clothing and locked all of my doors. I have a fond habit of driving at night, always a good way to waste time when my insomnia kicks in. I also use this to my advantage when going on road trips. This happened less than 2 weeks ago. I was headed to North Carolina from Ohio. I left around 10 at night and took the normal route, which runs State Route 35. A lot of the route is hilly/mountainous 4-lane divided country highway. The center divider is a concrete wall that you can barely see over, or at least 30 foot of grass dividers. Usually on this route, even at night, you are accompanied by semi-trucks running to West Virginia and other cars headed home from Ohio to WV or Virginia. I was with a group of travelers following this route, 1 semi-truck and 2 passenger cars. At around 11:30 I got a call from my mother, asking how I was doing, and we chatted for a few minutes. When she hung up and told me goodnight and to be safe, I looked up from my phone and realized the truck was gone and so were the cars. I thought to myself, no way they got off the road that quickly. But there was no trace of them. I had this eerie feeling come over me. I noticed no cars were in the oncoming lanes, and I didn't see any headlights behind me. I kept pushing on and just turned up my radio a bit. That's when I saw to the passenger side of my car a dark shadowy figure just off the highway on the berm. My heart skipped a beat, and I knew inside that wasn't a normal figure, but I brushed it off for the fact that I was doing 70 miles per hour, and it could have just been a deer. About an hour later I am on the split just outside of Leon, West Virginia, where 35 becomes a 2-lane road for a few miles. I had caught up to a semi-truck and had passed a few cars before this point, so I figured what I saw might have just been a vision. It started to rain a bit, so I turned my wipers on, and again, as soon as I looked to my right, I saw another dark shadowy figure on the side of the road, this time much more apparent. I was doing about 55 miles per hour, and could make out that it was very human-shaped in size and composure, but I couldn't make out anything past that. It was just a dark shadow figure. Spooked a bit, I sped up and caught up to the semi-truck and just tried to calm myself. I'm just tired, I'm seeing things. For the next 45 minutes everything is a blur. I don't remember anything but blankly staring at the road. But when I got to a rest stop in the mountains of WV, I pulled in, plenty of lights, semi-trucks and other people around. It's like 1 a.m. at this point. So I just turned my lights off and lay my seat back, left my car run and played the radio and tried to get some sleep. Around 1:45 I awoke to a feeling like someone was watching me. When I sat up I looked around and didn't see anyone. But I noticed on my driver's window there were what appeared to be very clear smudge marks of hands, like someone put their face to the glass to look in. I quickly put my seat back and got on the road quickly. I refused to stop anymore unless I had to. I made it into NC with only 1 fuel stop, and never had the problems again. But what happened in WV haunts me, even to today. I can't explain a reason for what I saw and had happen, and it's the only time that has happened to me. One night on your average weekend, I was up at 2 a.m. watching videos and browsing Reddit. I had a bottle of water next to me as my room gets really hot at night for some weird reason. Anyways, I was watching a video that was kinda creepy and I was a bit on edge for jump scares watching it. I don't know what made me do it, but an impulse made my head turn to the window, with the blinds closed, and I stared at it. I have sorta bad tinnitus, so I hear constant ringing at a high pitch. The ringing got louder and my head hurt. I saw a faint shadow move across the window and I could make out what sounded like tapping/light footsteps. I got up as my dog started barking and went to the door, transparent glass sliding door. I looked out and saw a dark figure on the top of the garage, which was in front of the door to the left. I blinked and rubbed my eyes and went back to my bedroom and bundled up in my covers. I fell asleep and woke up sweating. I never told anyone else because they knew of my fear for the dark and hallucinations in the dark. They probably wouldn't have believed me. I never saw that figure or heard that sound to this day. This was roughly early September 2017. This happened to me when I was 14 or 15. My friend had this slumber party and we had a good time. He lived in a new house his parents built a couple of years ago at the time. We all had a good time and we went to sleep at around 2 or 3 am-ish. We all slept on the couch. Yes, it was very tight, but I didn't really mind, we were so close. So I went to sleep peacefully, but I woke up around 5 am. I look over to my right where the TV and a lounge chair is and I see this shadow sitting on the chair, with its legs crossed. It was a big shadow and it definitely had the build of a male. My friend who was sleeping in front of me or beside me, I can't really remember, but I saw him sleeping somewhere on the couch, so I know it wasn't him, has a brother and he worked at a nightclub at the time, so he always went home pretty early in the morning, so I assumed it was him and I just turned over and went to sleep again. The next day I told my friend about the shadow in the chair and he tells me he has seen a lot of weird shit in that house and he would ask his brother if he was staring at us in the middle of the night with his legs crossed. Of course it wasn't him and I got freaked out. I know it wasn't a dream because I saw the shadow so vividly, and the fact that I remember he had his legs crossed and was very tall and manly build confirms my theory that I wasn't dreaming and it wasn't someone from the slumber party. The only man at the party was my friend and I know for sure it was not him. My friend's parents were home, but I don't think his dad would go out of bed at 5 in the morning just to stare at a bunch of teens sleeping in the dark. So yeah. I was a night shift truck driver for 15 years and I've seen some insane shit, but the story I'm about to tell really takes the cake. I pulled up outside a Dunkin' Donuts that I was making a delivery to, at about 2:30 am. This place was in the middle of nowhere. A gas station that was closed for the night was the only other building within sight of this DD. As I pulled around the building to park, I noticed a woman sitting on the curb outside of the front door. This is never a good sign. Usually this type of person is batshit crazy at best, and looking to rob me at worst. I pocketed my stun gun and got out of the truck. The woman approaches me, and it was only then that I noticed that her shorts and the lower half of her t-shirt were absolutely covered in blood. She started screaming, "My boyfriend stabbed me in my vagina," and kept repeating this phrase, changing words here and there but keeping the same idea intact. Pacing like someone on a huge dose of some sort of stimulant, she kept repeating the line about being stabbed in the vagina. I got on the phone to 911 dispatch and let them know that she needed help, and during this conversation, I attempted to calm the woman down and get her to sit, told her she needed to wait for EMTs and that I had called 911 for her. The request I made for her to sit and learning that I had called 911 triggered something else in her, and instead of repeating herself, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "It ain't my blood and it could be yours too." I got back in my truck and locked the doors. She took off into the field that borders the lot that the DD is situated in. I moved my truck to keep her in the headlights until she disappeared into the wood line a few hundred yards away. The cops showed up before the EMTs, and I was forced to wait in my truck until the police conducted a search and questioned me. I was there until dawn. They did not find the woman I had reported, and if not for the bloodstains on the curb, would likely have not believed my story whatsoever. I have no doubt that I met a killer that night. A killer who still walks free. This isn't extreme or anything, and 99% of the story is context, but it's completely true and was very creepy to me, so I figured I'd share. Junior year of college, I lived in the oldest residential dorm on campus. Naturally, the building had some ghost stories tied to it, but nothing crazy. The basement was creepy though, unfinished, ugly cement walls and floors, cobwebs hanging off of the old lighting, etc. The laundry facilities were down there and people would always try to get laundry done before it got too late at night because it was creepy there alone. There was also a locked door in the basement. Like many other students, I had a proclivity for exploring in college and I picked many locks to get into some fun places. I never had any luck with this one though, which was a bummer because I was very curious of it. It was kinda in the corner of the basement and couldn't have led to a very large room at all. It seemed so random, almost like a broom closet, but it wouldn't have made much sense to have a utility closet in the basement. I tried many unsuccessful times to get into that door. One day, after a string of long nights burning the midnight oil to finish assignments, I finally got work done early and was looking forward to some good sleep. Then a friend called with a personal problem and I walked to meet them. Then another friend called. Then after 1 a.m. a third messaged me. I am not a sociable person, so it was emotionally and mentally draining helping 3 friends in one night. I was happy to chat and I value being available to people, but it was such a strange, unlucky coincidence that 3 people needed me in one night. Particularly in the one night I was looking forward to early sleep. Oh well. So at around 2:30 a.m. I was walking back to my dorm, mentally drained and frankly annoyed that I was getting back so late. As I was fumbling with my keys to fob into the building, I felt this weird tingle on the back of my neck. Suddenly I felt an overwhelming desire to go down to the basement. The staircase leading to the basement is immediately inside the building. At first I thought I was subconsciously remembering that I left my laundry in the wash or something, but then I swear I felt a voice say, "Come down to the basement." I got into the building and just stood there, staring at the steps to the basement. It made no sense to go down there. Even worse, if someone was up late doing laundry, I'd seriously creep them out if I just moseyed down there for no reason. But that prickling feeling on my neck remained, and I swear I again felt a voice in my head urging me to go down to the basement, just for a moment. To be clear, this wasn't a scary moment. If anything, I was feeling excited. The best thing I can compare it to is when Harry Potter took Felix Felicis and said that he just felt like Hagrid's is the place to be. I knew I should go down the steps. Or at least it felt like something was telling me I needed to go to the basement, and so I did. I turned on the lights, saw no one at the washing machine. Nothing. I just stood in the middle of the basement floor, waiting a second or two for I don't know what. I felt like an idiot, but whatever, I was sleepy and it was time for bed. I turned around to go back up the stairs when I saw the locked door was wide open. I almost ran forward into it, but as I got closer I realized my assumption was right. It was a tiny room, barely bigger than a closet. But it was empty. Well, almost empty. It oddly had a single desk, like the small single desks for elementary school kids. So odd, so out of place. From the ceiling a single old light bulb was hanging over top the desk. The only other thing in the room, beside the desk, was an old beat-up computer chair. The kind that spins. And the damn chair was spinning. Slowly, but steadily enough that it wasn't from a draft. No one else in the basement, no one else in this weird tiny room, and it was spinning. I sprinted away up the stairs, sprinted up the 3 flights to my dorm, slammed my door shut and jumped into bed. I never tried picking that door open again, even in the safety of daytime. But I never again saw it opened, and I asked around without luck to see if anyone else ever saw in there. I was walking around my neighborhood alone once, enjoying the night air and watching the stars. There was this little pond near my house, with a wooded area that had trees, a bench and a rope swing that went out over the water. I sat down on the bench to look at the stars and I heard some rustling off to my right, towards the trees. Bears were not uncommon where I'm from, so I took out my flashlight and shone it around over there. I didn't see anything. It freaked me out, so I kept my flashlight on and my senses aware, but I stayed on the bench to mull over my thoughts and watch the sky some more. I don't know why I did that, cause that's typical horror movie shit. Anyway, a few minutes pass and I hear nothing more, so I lean back into the bench and start to relax a bit. I'm staring up at the sky with my flashlight pointed downwards, so as not to create any light pollution, when I notice something in the tree in my peripheral vision. I couldn't tell what it was, but the branch was swaying slightly, and the rustling noise was back too. I immediately sit up and stare at it, but hadn't shown my flashlight at it yet in case of pissing off some huge bird or something else. I don't think I've ever been that scared. I remember my heart was beating so fast and I could taste blood. I stared at it for what seemed like forever, and it slowly stopped moving. But the shape was still there. Bears do climb trees sometimes, so I was hesitant to run away in case that's what it was. So I just kept staring at it. After a while I mustered up the little raisin-esque cojones to shine my goddamned light at the tree. It was a man. A fucking man. In the tree. Crouched in the tree like some silent, naked monkey. He had no expression on his face, but his eyes were open really, really wide. When my light landed on him he started to move like he was going to come down, but I didn't stick around to see if he did. I jumped the bench and ran for the fucking hills. I ran to my house and around to the back door and locked myself in without looking back once. I went around and made sure every window and door was locked. I even checked the attic. I never go out alone anymore. I've always been a night owl, even as a kid. My dad had a rule that school nights, lights out at 10 p.m., but Fridays, Saturdays, vacation days, etc., I could stay up as late as I wanted, usually staying up till 3 a.m., sometimes 5 a.m. In 1989, when I was 12 years old, my dad bought a house. My first night there, I was in my room playing Nintendo around 2ish in the morning when I heard noises from the other room. I heard the bass of muffled music, people chatting, and pool balls clacking. It was a Saturday night, so I figured my dad had friends over. Then I realize, wait, we don't have a pool table. I step out into the hallway, and of course, all the lights were out. I can hear my dad snoring from his room, but the party noises were still coming from the living room. As I followed the noises, they got clearer and clearer until I was in the thick of it in the middle of the empty dark living room. It was bizarre. If you closed your eyes, you could swear you were at some sort of gathering. It creeped me the hell out at first, but soon found it fascinating. It happened nightly, so over the years, I would stay up and log details of the phenomena. The noises started at exactly 1:48 a.m. to 4:50 a.m. late June to late December, 2:03 a.m. to 5:01 a.m. the rest of the time, and would repeat nightly. I could pick out specific conversations. Like one woman talking about how she shouldn't smoke while she was pregnant, but it was so hard. Another guy telling a story about a motorcycle accident he had. The music, from what I could gather, was from between 1974 and 1983, as two of the songs I could distinctly remember were Stone Cold Crazy by Queen and Any Way You Want It by Journey. There were other songs, but I don't remember what they are since I don't have my old logbook anymore. Ask my dad about this, he would swear he never experienced it. Granted, he slept from 10:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m., but one would assume he would get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom or a late night snack and come across this. Though, when I had friends over for the night, they would experience this phenomenon. I wouldn't tell them about it beforehand because I wanted to know if they'd experience it and make sure I wasn't out of my mind. I even had a few friends stay on weekends to help me log the activity and even identify some of the songs. I ended up moving out of my dad's place when I was 22 years old, and he ended up selling the house a few years later. And 2 years ago, I moved out of state. I kinda miss the place. If I ever won the lottery or something, I'd totally buy it back and see if this creepy thing still happens every night. I'm not sure where to start, honestly. I've experienced some spooky shit both inside and outside my home, as well as dealt with a couple stalker situations, among other creepy things. Being a night owl all my life has brought me a heavy dose of weird. I'll only tell 2 short stories here. When I was 11, I was babysitting while my parents were out doing God knows what. It was 1 a.m. and I was downstairs in the living room, reading a book. I hear someone coming downstairs, so I look up and I see a small girl in a nightgown. I tell her to go back to bed, thinking she's one of my sisters. She just vanished. I guess she went back to bed? I was very creeped out, but shrugged it off. Only 2 hours later, the heavy downstairs door to my parents' bedroom began to open. My baby brothers were the only ones in that room, in cribs. I was frozen in alarm, watching the door pull itself completely open. A huge pair of ghostly shoes walked out of the room, right past me to go stand at the window of the foyer before also disappearing. I couldn't get myself to get out of my chair until after sunrise. When I was 15, I decided I was going to be an idiot and just not sleep. Around 6 a.m., making sure my brother on the top bunk of our bed didn't wake up, I snuck out of our upstairs bedroom window and climbed up onto the roof to watch the sunrise. It was a beautiful sight, with big puffy clouds and a rainbow of colors as the sky got slowly lighter. Then out from the clouds I saw this triangular object fly out. It was pretty far away, but looked nothing like any of the aircraft I've ever seen in my area. It was massive, had multicolored lights on its underbelly with some sort of circular pattern in the middle. It stayed hovering in the same place for a couple minutes before flipping backwards and disappearing back into the clouds. I wish I had a camera at the time or a cell phone. I was really freaked out about what I saw that I noped right off back to my room to sleep.